From the center of the universe and the home of your Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos post-game reaction podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing, after the Argonauts take out the Saskatchewan Roughriders for the second year in a row in TD Atlantic, 31-13. My name is Ben Grant. He's JB. We're sorry. First of all, we're coming to you a day late. We're usually so good about getting our pods out same day, our post-game reaction pods, but it just wasn't to be this time, JB. You were hours and hours ahead of me. I was on the wrong ocean, the wrong coast. And so it is the day after. Things have settled a bit. We may not be as off the cuff as usual, having had time to digest this. But yeah, before we get into the game, let me tell you a little bit about Something in the Water Brewing. I've got next to me Longboat, and it's nice to have Longboat back in my hands, and I can't wait to consume this one here. Longboat, of course, if you don't know, is the beer of the Double Blue. It was a beer made for fans of the Double Blue. Something in the Water Brewing is located in Liberty Village, just steps away from the Argos practice facility, Lamport Stadium, and just steps away from BMO Field, where the Argos play their home game. It's a great place to go before the game. I was talking to those guys before the season started, and I was saying, like, you know, I kind of feel like I should have a beer for different occasions, because obviously Longboat's a great celebratory beer. It's a great pregame beer. But I thought, you know, there are going to be some tough losses, and you need something to go along with that too. We have not had the occasion to do anything like that. So it's been Longboat Pale Ale for the last little while, which is fine by me because the Argos just keep winning. And so it's celebratory. So JB, speaking of celebratory, you got to enjoy several days of festivities being out there in Halifax. Before we get into the game, how was the environment, the parties, the get-togethers, the actual game itself, the mood, the stadium? Give me what you got.
It was another resounding success. As good as Wolfville, better in some ways. I think there were more Argo fans at this game than there were in Wolfville. It was terrific. I went down, as people know, I'm not necessarily the public face of the podcast. So I went down to an Argos party that was being hosted at a bar in Halifax. And I was a little nervous because I don't really like socializing. And it was amazing. I got to talk to all sorts of Argo fans, that were all united by from different ages and different backgrounds, just united in having a good time and feeling confident about the game. There were certainly lots of Rider fans around Halifax. There were a lot of green shirts in every bar you went into. But the party was fantastic. I got to meet a real celebrity, a real Argo celebrity, certainly not me. I got to talk to Lori, which was amazing. And, it was just talking to some fantastic people who were just so kind and so complimentary, to the podcast, but also just wanted to talk Argos. It was, really my honor to have the conversations that I got to have with just the nicest, smartest football fans that you could ever run into. So it made my week. I have to say, I really, really enjoyed my conversation. And then the game, the weather was predicted to be off all week. There's going to be thunderstorms. There's going to be a lot of rain. What were they going to do? And the weather held. Weather was perfect. It was blazing hot to begin, but then it cooled down, and the crowd had a blast. Great competitive game. No issues logistically. Everybody got in time for kickoff. The stadium emptied in about 2.5 seconds at the end of the game. So, logistically, hats off to everybody who organized that event, the pregame, the party section, if you will. The tailgate section, went really well. My friends were in the end zone, got high-fived by the Argos when they scored their touchdown. The one takeaway is how awesome it was to be right on top of the field. I mean, the stands were right there. It was incredible how close we were to the action, and the people in the end zone even more so. So Yeah, I hope it translates into a bit of traction in the city about getting some games going. But like I was giddy last year about the Wolfville experience, and no different this year. It was an absolute success. Hats off to everybody who was involved because it was terrific.
They're so close to being like, all you need to add is like, if you add like 4,000 seats, that's a complete, like, there's no reason why you can't have a 15,000 seat stadium.
Yeah,
That's,
and
and that would be beautiful there.
no parking issue. Honestly, it's right there to be had. They just need to find an investor who has a connection to football and as I was talking about at the party, follow the BC game plan and look how somebody can take a team that's kind of going nowhere and turn it into a success. So they just need to find that person who cares enough, because the teams in the league that are successful have great single ownership. And you look at BC and you look at Hamilton, those are rock solid franchises right now because the ownership is driven by somebody who's creative and wants it to work. And that's what Halifax needs, because it's not a rich part of the country, and every dollar is fought for, and you have to fight hockey for people's attention. So it's not a slam dunk. We would need somebody to come in who knew what they were doing about marketing. But I think if you played it right, you could strike oil with the three Atlantic Canadian provinces, along with Nova Scotia, in terms of making it a destination event. So it was exciting. I couldn't have been happier with how well it went. And from everybody, I didn't poll people, but certainly the dynamic in the stadium was that people had a blast.
And in terms of like locals, people were aware the event was going on. It wasn't like what, they were playing football here today?
A little bit. I mean, I'll be honest. It was, I don't think. I think it's hard to advertise too much. I think also because the game sold out relatively quickly because
Right.
of the Rider fans. So the need to sort of inundate with advertising sort of dissipated a little. And to be honest, because of whatever reasons, the teams did not come in early, did not make a sort of a week of it the way they did last year. That would have upped it if there had been some Grand Parade events, if there had been some kind of, any kind of interesting creative things. I felt that was, that was too bad that wasn't possible. But, other than that, they have to, I don't think Saskatchewan is very happy and may never want to come back to Nova Scotia. But, the Argos looked over the moon, and then the guys eating the lobster roll, it looked like at the end of the game, sort of a la John Madden.
Yeah, that was awesome.
TSN crushed it with their broadcast. They brought lots of cameras. It was very professional looking. It didn't look like a football game being played in at a random stadium, which it could. It's not a professional stadium. And I just thought the whole presentation, the whole event was amazing. I mean, honestly, I'd complain if I could. But I can't. It was fantastic.
And I love that the TSN guys get around as well. Like they go out and they socialize and they interact with fans. I think that's really cool. When the panel travels, they're great about that. Whether it's Kate or Matt or Shanetti or any of those guys, they're interacting and they're socializing with everybody that wants to talk CFL. So I think that's kind of cool. And I know a lot of the Argos fans that went down were excited to be able to interact and talk with other Riders fans, with the TSN group, with each other. So it's cool that you got to be part of that contingent. I was definitely felt like I was missing out as I was actually on a ferry for most of the game, and then we we came in, right at the end, and I kind of had to go back and watching and not seeing it live. It was not the same energy, obviously, that you got to experience it through. So let's go through the game a little bit, maybe not chronologically, but some of the highs and lows and interesting moments. First of all, the Argos, it's fair to say they dominated this game, right? 31-13, but 10 of those Rider points came in the fourth quarter. Is this a dominant Argos win?
Yeah, it went by the playbook. It felt like, it felt competitive, which was good. It didn't feel like a blowout, but it felt like the Argos were the better team, especially defensively. They just had no answer for the Argos defensively. And, and then it just sort of squeezed the air out of the ball in that second half. There was it looked like there might have been some life. But I will say, though, it's a perfect example of that old coach's line about 3 plays being the difference. If they catch that ball in the end zone instead of dropping it, if they don't fumble on the 1 yard line, and if they're able to not allow a kick return touchdown, it's a totally different game. Just 3 plays. So yes, it was dominant, but everything went the Argos way.
Because one of my takeaways was that I think Saskatchewan's a really good football team. Their defense was super tough.
Yeah. You take away those 3 things and it, but that's the difference against a fantastic team like the Argonauts. You can't have 3 mistakes.
Because you look at the stats are the weirdest of all the games so far this season.
Weird.
Because Saskatchewan, Toronto's defense, Toronto's secondary, I thought was phenomenal.
Yeah, and they gave up 400 yards.
I know they gave up 400 yards passing.
I know,
but it was all 8-yard passes. A lot of them were.
Yeah, it's true. It's certainly padded by when they were up and they were basically just playing keep people in front, and a couple of times guys broke free and racked up some yak, and we're able to boost that. And then somehow Dolagala came in and decided to be John Elway, which was unexpected.
He is, though, in a small sample size, Jake Dolagala is the prototypical quarterback in almost every way until you get him into a game scenario where a team is prepped for him. And then he's
the perfect guy to bring. Yeah, he came in and, threw the rock. It was interesting. I know my friends who watched the game were, really frustrated. They were, looking for a competitive game, really frustrated that Saskatchewan didn't take more deep shots. Because they just weren't getting any running action going, and that underneath game, guys were getting crushed. But they didn't have time to get deep shots. The defensive line. I loved having Brinkman and CN Power on the field at the same time, or being dressed together. Defensively, the Argos were just ferocious. But you are correct. It was a very weird game in that the score looks like a huge blowout, but I was really impressed. I thought Saskatchewan played well and certainly played defensively much better than any team has the Argos this year.
And I think, let's go back to talk for a second about the there's a few things you brought up there, but let's talk about Brinkman, Oakman, and Hendricks. So we've been talking all year about finding a way to get those 3 American interior D linemen or dressed at the same game, because you had Brinkman as a healthy scratch, I think for 3 games maybe. Hendricks was injured for 1 game, and Oakman was a healthy scratch a couple times. And none of these 3 guys should ever be healthy scratches. Hendricks is one of the best defensive linemen in the league. Oakman and Brinkman are not far behind him. The only reason they're scratched has nothing to do with skill. They're really good players. It's just how many Americans can you dress at the same positional group? And so the way they found to do it, it seemed to me there were going to be 2 options this week. Option 1, which I kind of thought they'd do and they didn't. Jordan Williams was back healthy. I thought they might sit Jonathan Jones, who's been playing for Jordan Williams, essentially. They kind of moved, really, it's kind of been McManus who slid over and playing that spot, but whatever. You would have sat Jonathan Jones, and then that would have enabled you to address an extra D lineman, American D lineman. They didn't do that, though. And in fact, Jones played the majority of the snaps. We didn't really see Williams out there much at all. Instead, they sat Tavares McFadden and went really light at DB. There are some risks to that, though, because as we saw briefly, Deshaun Amos went down with an injury very briefly. And in that time, Jonathan Edward came in to play halfback. And that's really not, just like when he came in for Darius Pickett a few games ago, he came in here for Deshaun Amos. I just think there's a bigger drop off there than if McFadden is dressed, than what they would have done instead is they would have probably would have slid Qantas Stiggers over to halfback, and McFadden would have gone in at corner. And I think there's not too much drop off there at all. So I'm kind of surprised they went this route and dressed so few DBs, but I'm glad they found a way to do it. I'd like to find a way to do it that doesn't make me as nervous if guys start falling. Cause I think you've got linebackers, like you've got Hoyt, you've got Kassar, you've got guys that can fill in. And you don't feel like, okay, now we're in real trouble here. Whereas I don't feel as confident where the secondary is right now if you're just not dressing any backups anywhere but at safety. So I don't know your thought on that, but worth getting those three guys?
I think it's probably a game-by-game decision, depending on, what you're looking at, what you think your pressure points are. And I think they felt that they could get after the quarterback, and that if they could, that would, be a decider. I like it. I agree. It's a risk, but that's the nature of the CFL rule. Sometimes, I would rather them run the occasional risk than play it safe and not have a game-specific best possible lineup.
Yeah, and they do seem to do that. There were, and let's talk about Saskatchewan not going downfield deep, because it looked to me. And again, I hate not being in the stadium because it's so much harder to tell on the TV broadcast. And this is one. And if you missed a few episodes, you don't know what we're talking about. I was out in BC for my sister's wedding, and so I didn't get a chance to do the radio call this week. Bob Bronk was filling in for me on TSN radio, and so I'm just stuck with the regular TV angle, and it looked like the coverage was playing way off, that the DBs were just sort of sitting back, and they were essentially saying, kind of like we talked about before, if you want to take 8-yard passes all day long, great, we will let you take those. But then every so often someone would pinch, someone would play a robber roll or disguise their flats coverage. And that's where you got a couple interceptions. And actually one of them, I think it was the Robertson Daniel interception, was because they dropped Flo Romolade into coverage on that. They ran like a fire zone. They blitzed 5. Flo, who's off the left edge, drops into coverage, which then allows Robertson Daniel to roll. And he rolled to center field and undercut that post route that was intended for Sean Bain. And I thought that was really clever. But for the most part, they're sitting back, and if you're going to throw deep against that, it's going to get picked. And so you have to just live with trying to put 10 play drives together and get down the field that way, or run. And they couldn't run successfully because that Argo front 5-6 were so good at shutting it down. And that starts with Brinkman and Hendricks and Oakman. Those guys were animals in there. So it just made it really tough for Saskatchewan. So you look at the yards, like 400 yards passing, but what's not there are the rushing yards. You had Morrow with 41 yards, and half of that came on one run where he got free. But other than that, there was just nothing in the ground game. And in 3-down football, you just can't string drives together where you have to, because as soon as you get one incomplete pass, well, you're punting. So I thought it was smart from Corey Mace.
Yeah, the line and the line, racked up their sacks, and not in a blowout style, but really when they were needed, where Saskatchewan was driving, it looked like they were going to get into the red zone, it looked like they were going to put something together, and then immediately when that sense was happening, they unleashed hell and drove them back 12 yards out of field goal territory.
I know, it was like back-to-back sacks.
It was amazing. There was Oakman had a sack lying on the ground.
Yeah, because he's so long. He was on the ground, and from the TV angle, it looked like Fine was like 7 feet away from him, which he probably was. And Oakman just like somehow tripped him from there.
It was amazing. I mean, honestly, it was being so close to the game in this stadium, like this sort of really almost like, high school, like I mean, we were closer than we were in Guelph. Like we were right on top of them, and you could just see the speed and power of that defensive line, is really what made the difference. Because I thought Mason Fine played pretty well.
He's all right.
He was running for his life.
Yeah, he had no time. And he got hit so hard.
I mean, he made some really nice like seam throws. I mean, I was pretty impressed actually. I thought he was good.
Yeah, I don't think Saskatchewan, I know Saskatchewan fans, I'm sure, are frustrated by like just getting what felt like a blowout, and I think was in many ways. But I think the team is all right. Like I think I would actually be excited about a few things if I were Saskatchewan. I know it's tough to take that away and it sounds patronizing, but that's not how I mean that. I do think there's some real stuff to build on for the Riders. So, and I think it was a really nice test for the Argos too, because they actually made Toronto's offense look pretty normal. You look at some of those numbers, like Chad Kelly, 122 yards passing. One touchdown, one pick.
It felt watching, there were a couple of, it wasn't out of control, but there were a couple of penalties, a couple of drive-killing penalties. There was not a lot of space for the receivers. I felt like it was kind of 50-50 in some ways. It felt like there were some tough catches that maybe could have been made that would have helped, but also Chad didn't feel on. He led a guy too far early, which would have been a touchdown, or a couple of rocket balls that were, like if you're going to throw a rocket ball, it's got to be perfect. It's really tough to ask a receiver to adjust to a rocket ball. But he had to because the defense was right there. So, I thought that Saskatchewan definitely had was able, it felt like they ran blitz the whole game, just shooting gaps, just like, okay, we're going to bring 6 guys and we're going to fill every gap and let's see you run now. So it felt that way. And, and then the run blitz, kind of worked because they were chasing Chad too. He didn't get sacked a lot, but he didn't have time to let plays develop. They were all over the Argos offense. The offense really never got it going the whole game.
I thought there were 2 things that contributed to that, and maybe you can tell me what you felt just sort of being there in the stadium. But I feel like not having DeMonte Coxie out there was surprisingly a big deal. Now I say surprisingly, nothing against Coxie, but it's not like Coxie has been a long-standing CFL star. He's had some really good games this year, and so I didn't really think of the loss of Coxie as being one that was going to be really difficult for Chad to overcome. But it did seem like that. Jeremiah Hiddell was in for Coxie and was only targeted once, and I think that was the ball that was picked. I think Hiddell had a go route, and Chad
didn't fight great for that ball.
Right, Chad back shouldered it, but it didn't seem like Hiddell was on the same page, didn't know it was coming, got picked, and then that was it. He didn't go back to him again. That was the only ball, and it's tough. If that's your ex receiver, you can't. It's so tough. Like that should be the guy that's getting the most targets at X or W, like Davaris' spot. And then a couple balls too. There was one that Davaris, it would have been a really tough catch, but we've seen Davaris make it again and again. It was pretty early in the game. He would have had to catch it and then like ricochet off the safety and then go to ground at like the 2-yard line. And it was just one of those that we've seen him make that catch so many times, and you just kind of take for granted that he will.
Right. I think that was, that because it's been true. There has been games where, the receivers have made 4 or 5 really spectacular catches, and so like the stats look really good, but you're like, hey, the receivers are these are not necessarily perfect balls that they're bringing down. So that, I think that's what happened. I think the odds evened out a little bit, and those really tough contested balls just they just couldn't bring in.
And any concern in the running game, like they still end up with like 90 yards rushing. So it's not like they
Harris
couldn't
looked nice.
run.
I thought Harris
did.
looked spry.
Let's talk about Harris for a couple of seconds, because first of all, we can't not acknowledge Harris's record-setting day. So he moved into 5th all-time in CFL rushing, which is impressive, passing his own childhood hero. I think that's a really cool moment. And so, and after the game, I think Chad Kelly in his post-game press conference referred to Andrew Harris as the best CFL running back, and I think there was sort of I think what he meant by that was like a greatest of all time kind of thing. And so I thought, looking back at Harris's numbers, just going over some of his stats, it is pretty unbelievable what Andrew Harris has done in his career. And so that needs to be said. And he looked really good running the ball. It looked like Saskatchewan wasn't really ready for the punishment. They were ready for Ouellette, but it seemed like when Harris was out there, it's like, okay, well, we can take a breath for a second. And he just punished them for thinking that. He ended up with, I think he was the leading rusher. Yeah, 7 carries for 41 yards, which it's a modest day, but he ran well.
No, I mean, it felt like they were, like they just, like I said, it felt like they run blitzed a lot. And it was just, I mean, that's the nature of a lead. Like, he has to get going. And there were just guys in the backfield, before anything could really get going. A couple times he got a bit of momentum and he punished some guys, but just a lot of times it was, it was a meeting in the backfield and just no room to turn it on. But, I think that's okay. Now, what'll be interesting will be, teams are going to study this film, and anytime a defense has a great game against you, that's going to be a book. So I think the next game will be really interesting to see if another team is able to duplicate that.
For sure they will. Like Calgary coming up next is going to look at Saskatchewan and say, okay, this was the most success any defense has had against the Argonauts. Let's see what we can, like, how we can repeat that, but also improve upon it, test Chad and AJ
it looked like
in
maybe
different areas.
Maybe more. We don't get into OCDC. We'll leave that. I won't step on OCDC.
Yeah, we'll deal with that during the week.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that drove me up the wall, I don't know if it did you, probably not, just because we're usually on different pages here. And I apologize if this was for some reason and I just didn't know about it, a tribute, or there was some sort of rationale to it. And I'm just, getting mad at something that was supposed to be, something special or something significant. But Andrew Harris was not wearing socks. I wrote about this on 3 Down Nation in my post-game thoughts. That got me. I couldn't even watch the game for a while because he was wearing no socks.
We are definitely on different pages.
That didn't that you didn't even notice, did you?
No.
I
don't know their numbers, and I don't notice their socks.
You not knowing their numbers still is baffling to me. And this is not just, for those that don't know JB well, which is probably most of you, this is not just an Argos thing. JB doesn't know his own players' numbers, has no idea who anyone is, and the teams that he's followed. I think you probably know 3 people's numbers in professional football. That's just how you are.
Maybe, yeah,
maybe. But
I do not see the numbers. I certainly do not see socks.
It's such an easy marker. Why I hate it's not. So I am being old school football coach a little bit here, but it's not because I'm wear your uniform, son. I like that. I do believe in that, but this is more about being able to quickly identify players. I love to, as a coach, if a player that I'm trying to track is wearing fluorescent yellow cleats, that's great. I love that. I love when another team's best player or player that indicates a shift or a different personnel package is wearing something that clearly identifies them, because it's so easy to keep track of. You're like, oh yeah, anytime Yellow Shoes is out here, yeah, we got to do this. And they spend time on it. There's a reason at practice they wear pennies with the opposing team's numbers on them, because they're looking, okay, when 45's out here, we do this. When 45 lines up here, we do this. That's part of the strategy that week. And so if you're going to make it easy by being the only guy not wearing socks, it's so simple to be you're trying to keep track of where Harris goes. If he's at all a key for you and he's not wearing socks, it's not like they wouldn't have found him anyway. It's Andrew Harris, but it makes it that much easier. It's like, hey, there's no socks. So that just that I was so annoyed about that. But again, maybe it was something special and I didn't know, and now I'm complaining heartlessly about something else. So I apologize if that's the case, but I haven't heard anything like that yet. So it just makes me mad instead. Receivers, nobody stepped up. This is the only game where there wasn't a receiver that like came to dominate. We've seen Coxie do it. We've seen Tavares do it. Curley had his game last week. Ungerer had a game against Montreal. Nobody today. Nobody yesterday stepped up.
They just weren't on the same page the whole game. It was, it felt like, that Chad was under pressure a lot. He had to get rid of the ball quickly. Guys were not getting tons of separation. And there were some contested balls, that just tough catches that they didn't come down with. And, offense is, as is such a streaky kind of vibe feel. Like you kind of just get into it and you feel it, and they just were disjointed from the beginning and couldn't find a way, even on the touchdown with all the quick hitters. They just sort of quick hit their way into the end zone. Like Madden, when you find a play that works really well, you do it 4 times in a row. It wasn't a great day for the wide receivers, but they were due for a down day, and the defense picked them up.
Yeah, let's talk about that defense a little bit. The defense bailed out the offense on a couple occasions. They had a pick 6, which obviously helps. They also created a fumble an inch from the goal line, it looked like. Yep. I didn't see a great angle of where that ball came out, but it must have been.
I think they just, I think it was sort of once they ruled that on the field, I think they were just sort of stuck with it.
You couldn't see it. Yeah, and it looked like Pickett made a heck of a play. I think Flo held him up, and then Pickett came in and, while sort of shouldering him to the ground, punched out the ball, I believe, and the Argos were able to recover.
No, it was
just heads
fantastic.
Up football.
Yeah, I mean, it was defense's day, 100%. You could, there were a lot of 2 and outs.
And let's sing some praises for Mickey Donovan too. His special teams unit had a great day. They not only had the punt return touchdown, they played really well. One of the concerns coming in, we talked about you can't let Mario Alford dominate the game, and he was not invisible. He played fine.
No, they were all over him.
Yeah,
fantastic coverage. Great kick coverage. BD was ice the whole game. Just piping the field goals, and then Leak looked like, he looked like the best returner in the league, not Alford. Hats off to the special teams, because they absolutely pinned in really who had been the best returner in the league.
I want to, again, this is something that I wrote in my 3 Down Nation article, but I just want to talk about it on this pod too, because I thought it was such a funny moment. When Leak caught that punt, the one that he returned for a touchdown, there was space on his left, and it was clearly a return right. It was almost like an old school, wall right that every high school team ever ran. But it must have been so tempting when he caught that ball just to go left, because there was space. He probably could have got 15, 20 yards going left, but the return was designed to the right. And I know you and I have sat at practice, and we've seen over the years going back to Coach Nelson, for example, too, running special teams. There's nothing special teams coaches hate more than when a returner does not follow his path. When it's a return right and the returner is instead but look what I got here, and then takes off to the left. And I could almost hear Mickey Donovan yelling in Javon Leake's head as he caught that ball, follow your blocks, go right. Because it wasn't an easy path to get right. He actually had, because I don't think there was actually really good blocking initially on that. The Gunners weren't slowed down at all. They had already formed a halo. So Leak had to backtrack to be able to get right. And then he broke a tackle as well. And there were all his blockers waiting for him on the right. And then the rest was just, dancing in the end zone.
And it shows how he is, in that he's not, twitchy in the way Alford is, in that kind of sprinter first 3 steps, he's gone. But if you give Leak 5 steps, his second gear is elite. And if he gets into third gear, there's not a guy in the field who's going to catch him.
Yeah, we saw that with the last one.
And you see that, like he does have elite return speed. It just it's a different type of return, because it takes a couple steps for him to get going. But once he gets going, his top speed is amazing. So that's really the key for them. Is he actually is a guy who should reverse field, because you give him 5, 6, 7 steps unblocked, without conflict or contact, he actually can reverse field, which is, even with blocking, usually an absolute no-no in returning.
Yeah, you don't want to run backwards typically, but he had to in order to get through his blocks.
And he had that gear. He just put it into it, and it was. He was all day. He was a weapon all day. It wasn't just like one kind of fluke return. He was on fire all day. He giving them fantastic field position, and he was really I thought it was by far his best game as an Argo.
Yeah, I think so too. The one, actually, my favorite return of his wasn't the touchdown. It was the one where he came up the left side, and it was really squeezed in. It was a beautiful punt, pinned him right to the sideline, and there was this little like gauntlet course that he had to navigate up the left sideline, and somehow he maintained his speed while breaking tackles and dodging tacklers.
Yeah, he averaged 29 yards a return.
I know.
29. Remember, we used to argue. I'd be like, oh God, they can't even get the 5 halo. Yeah. 29, and with 6, that's not 2 kicks. So like that is spectacular.
And they did not have
special teams.
Yeah, it was because Beatty was perfect. He was, I guess, 5 for 5 if you include field goals and PATs. Haggerty didn't try to punt the ball out of the stadium, which I guess is a tactical move, trying not to give too much run up to Mario Alford. But he punted conservatively but effectively, and so
you don't want to outkick the coverage, right? Especially with Alford,
right?
Is if he sees a lane. He is so elusive. He can just slide through. No, I thought that was really smart as well. There was a little bit of wind, kind of gusty. Not so. There were a couple times where kicks went a little deeper than you would hope, but the coverage teams were, clearly they had focused on it. Clearly they took pride in identifying this as Saskatchewan's primary weapon, and they absolutely came out and dominated.
Yeah, that was the key to the game for us coming into this, was like, don't give them free points. No pick sixes, no special teams touchdowns, and instead it was the Argos with pick sixes and special teams touchdowns. Occurred to me. Yeah, no, so that's, it was great to see though, because again, a day where the offense doesn't look dominant, defense pulls their weight, special teams more than pulls their weight. Great game all around. A little bit of history set too, because the Argos now at 6-0 have matched a franchise record for the best start in the 150-year history of the Argos. 6-0 to start the season is now has them tied for the record with the 1935 and 1921 teams, and they have a chance to set that mark at 7-0, a franchise best. This week against Calgary in Calgary. So that'll be a tough one for sure. But it's certainly possible. And I think the offense is going to bounce back. I do think we'll probably see Kosi back. We'll see what happens with that. I haven't really gone over the injury status. But on the topic of injuries, one thing you and I have ranted about got me so upset again. I don't know if you noticed it or not, because the TVs barely did. I don't know if you noticed it in stadium. The point after on Saskatchewan's touchdown. This is the Jake Dolegala touchdown. I think it was their only touchdown, right? Yeah, their only touchdown. On the point after, Adarius Pickett was down for a little bit. I think he's fine. I don't think it was anything to worry about. But they actually did have to stop play for him to be to be addressed, and it actually shows up in the playlist on the game sheet. And I went back and looked at that play, and he's lined up in a 3-point stance trying to block the point after, and he gets sort of thrown to the ground by an offensive lineman. And I just think, like, we've talked about not wanting Adarius Pickett on special teams. We know, like, obviously he has to be on some. We get it. Numbers wise, Adarius Pickett is one of the best special teams players on the team. everyone's got to play, especially DBs, linebackers. They're going to have to play special teams. He can't be on all of them, and you cannot have him lining up in a 3-point stance trying to block an extra point. That cannot be Darius Pickett's job, because again, that probably, it didn't stop my heart at the moment because I didn't notice it until after the fact. But yeah, that's just another reason to just find teams he can play on. Don't have him blocking field goals and extra points. JB, let's get to our players of the game and our plays of the game. So where are you going for player of the game? Who is your player of the game?
Yeah, there was, I think I often will go defensively. So like, McManus obviously was fantastic. And, I thought Hendricks played a monster game. Again, it's not flashy stuff, but he's so good. Like, he's just such a good defensive lineman. But I'm going to go with the man of the hour. I have to give it to Javon Leak. I thought he changed the momentum of that first half. If he doesn't score that touchdown, it doesn't stretch the lead out into something that feels a little more intimidating than it was. He gave the Argos great starting position all game. Javon Leak was I thought the best player on the offense for the Argos.
Yeah, I know he was unbelievable and such a weapon in this game. I am going to go myself with Wyndon McManus. I'm curious to see. There's a couple guys whose PFF grade I'm curious to see, and he's one of them. I thought he played a sensational game.
And they blitzed him.
Yeah, he blitzed off the edge quite a few times. Yeah, he came up the middle a couple times.
Oh my God, loved it.
He hit Mason Fine so hard. He actually had 2 sacks. In the stat sheet, they only gave him credit for 1, but he had 2 sacks. One where he came around the edge and sort of threw Fine to the ground. The other one, he came up the middle and just
annihilated him.
Leveled him.
I know, just hit him. So on the. Just really hit him so hard.
And he almost had a pick in there as well. He dropped back into coverage nicely.
Like he tackles. He was all over the field.
Yeah, led both teams in tackles with 8.
Yeah, he was ready for that game. It was awesome to watch.
Yeah, so he's my player of the game. And yeah, like you said, shout out to Hendricks. His stats are never there. We've got to make sure we have to do our part in making sure he is recognized as an all-star, because I do think Hendricks is one of the best defensive tackles in the entire league. He makes guards miss without even being able to touch him. Brinkman did a bit of that too, which is also impressive. But
yeah,
Hendricks
if you just unleashed Hendricks and just made him a pass rusher, I think he could be one of those 12, 15 sack guys.
Yeah, no, he would have huge numbers, but he's got a different job, and that's not really the way they use him. But yeah, he's so hard to block, and he gets double teamed a ton, which opens up the other guys too. So the stats won't be there. So it's the reason that he unfortunately, I don't think he will be an all-star, and he absolutely should be.
The all sack team.
Yeah, you look at sack numbers,
sacks for linemen and interceptions for DBs.
But that's why, I'm interested to see his PFF grade as well, because I would have had that super high just looking at him play by play. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. What is your play of the game?
Well, I went Leak already. You know what I thought was the play of the game for me? He was in the fourth quarter, and Saskatchewan was pushing a little, and it felt like they were trying to get back into it, and they kicked a field goal, and Toronto looked like they were going to go 2 and out again. It just didn't look like it was together. And Cam Phillips made this amazing catch over the middle, like a low throw with kind of a contested catch, and it was enough to keep a drive alive that ended up being a field goal, and then that was basically it. They went back up, 2 scores, and the pick at the end was sort of the gravy. But I thought that Cam Phillips play in the fourth quarter, about 10 minutes left, was if they give the ball up there, it gets way dicier in those last 10 minutes. So I thought that was a really big catch.
And I think I'm going to go, mine's going to sound so much more like it usually does. My play was a little more showy. Yours is more artistic. Like Ken Phillips had a decent game. He was targeted 6 times, 4 catches for 38. It's a good game, but that was a sensational catch. It was a big moment. I'm going with the pick 6, which I know is not a subtle play of the game, but I just thought it was so beautifully done. Mason Fine had no idea at all that Deshaun Amos had flats on that play. They disguised it so well. 100% he thought Pickett had flats and that his receiver who was running an out route had a couple steps on Pickett, but he was being baited, and it was Deshaun Amos holding his ground, but he was planted. You watch the replays, he's planted ready to explode forward is the only direction he was ever going to go, but he's trying to make it, he's just kind of blending into the coverage as everyone's like backing out. And he explodes on that. And making it even more difficult for Fine is Sean Oakman. Sean Oakman hit Fine so hard on that play. That was, I think it knocked him out of the game. Like I do think that was like Dolegala came in after that.
He basically like picked him up off the field. Kind of like, are you okay, man? Like, oof.
It was a clean hit, but it was just so like Oakman shed his block so fast, and he's got a great explosion coming off the line, and he just accelerated into Fine, hit him right as he released the ball.
Oakman was on fire today too. He really, I know clearly he wants to be on the field every game, and
he should be, but that's the problem. They all should be.
Yeah, no, I get the math of it, but he definitely looked like a guy who was going to make that conversation a much harder one to have.
For sure. But then you look at the very first play from scrimmage for Saskatchewan. Brinkman's guard doesn't touch him. Jared Brinkman is the widest player on the football field, and the guard standing a yard in front of him doesn't even lay a finger on him, and that's his only assignment. Because Brinkman had that quick, explosive step.
I mean, it was so true when we watched the film last year when we signed him, and we're like, "Whoa!" This guy's first step is elite, like NFL elite.
Yeah,
he just isn't built like a superhuman.
It's the height. He doesn't have the height. Like if he had height, he'd be in the NFL. But they don't like 6 foot, 6'1" interior guys.
But for a guy his size, his first 2 steps are. I mean, it's all over the film when he came. You're like, holy! He catches guys by surprise. They look at him. He looks like he's going to be sort of a 2-gapper, and here we go. And then he's past you. Like an edge.
Yeah, no, exactly. Anyway, we'll have to start wrapping things up here, but what a great trip that was for so many Argos fans that made the journey out there, and thanks to for all of you that were sharing the experience on Twitter for me to sort of follow along vicariously through you as you were enjoying booze cruises and parties on Argyle Street or whatever that main strip is.
It is indeed Argyle.
It is Argyle. But it looked like everyone had such a great time, and what a nice thing. After losing the first 2 touchdown Atlantics they played, the Argos have won 2 in a row, and I know that flight home probably feels a lot better for Argos fans after a big victory like that. Well, that will just about do it for us on this post-game reaction episode of the X's and Argos podcast. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight